everyone, this is Marika and I welcome you all to this new session of Community Health Nursing with me. In our previous sessions, we have discussed about food hygiene, what is food adulteration, what is food fortification, and what are the different ways through which milk, fruits and vegetables, eggs and meat can be maintained in a hygienic manner. In this session today, we are going to discuss another interesting topic related to food, which is foodborne diseases. So we have been discussing how food affects our health, how food impacts the health of an individual, right? We have understood that food is one of the major source of our energy, helps us to maintain our life and also help us to lead a healthy life. And so the food is consumed on a daily basis and it is consumed in different way in different parts of the world. We've also understood the fact that food can be a major source of infection if proper hygienic measures are not followed, leading to various foodborne illnesses. So what is foodborne illness or what is a foodborne disease? A foodborne illness or a foodborne disease is the disease that is produced by the pathogenic microorganisms after the consumption of the food by the individual. So in the food, there will be pathogenic microorganisms, and when the individual consumes the food or fruits and vegetables, any form of food, the pathogenic microorganism enters inside the body of an individual, causing foodborne illnesses. Now, foodborne disease can be caused by the pathogenic microorganism that a plant, a fruit, a vegetable or any food items may harbor, or it may also be caused due to the toxins that are present in the food naturally. So, a foodborne illness or a foodborne disease is the disease that is caused after the ingestion of the food that has been contaminated by the microorganisms. If the food that we ingest is contaminated with pathogenic microorganisms, if it has any kind of toxins that is harmful for human body, at any age group, the foodborne diseases may occur. It not only leads to foodborne diseases or illnesses, but also mortality is associated with various foodborne illnesses when people ingest the food that is contaminated by microorganism, or if there is presence of any kind of toxins in the food that is consumed. The food that we consume is not just a source of infection, but is also associated with mortality. Now, if the food is ingested with the toxins that are present in the food, then it is obvious that it may lead to the death of the person as well. Foodborne diseases can be acquired by the person by ingesting the food that are contaminated with various bacteria and viruses. Another reason why we humans can acquire foodborne disease can be the use of harsh chemicals, the use of harmful chemicals during the time of processing of the food. In United States, every year 76 million people suffer from foodborne diseases, and out of 76 million, 5,000 people die every year only because of foodborne diseases. Each year in India, in our country, around 100 million foodborne illnesses are reported and 1,20,000 deaths are related to foodborne diseases. So the number of foodborne diseases in India and also in different parts of the world is increasing. The death associated with foodborne diseases are also increasing. I hope you've understood what foodborne illness is. A foodborne illness is an illness or a disease that is acquired by the person after the ingestion of the food that has been contaminated with bacteria and viruses or with the toxins that are naturally present in the food. Foodborne disease is one of the major problems that is faced by the people in the world today. Now, foodborne diseases can be caused. The causative organism of the foodborne diseases can be many, right? Let us see what are those. The first the first organism associated with foodborne disease is Salmonella. The causative organisms associated with the foodborne diseases includes Salmonella, Shigella, and Escherichia coli. These are certain causative organisms, but there are certain factors which are included which also causes the illness. It is not just about presence of bacteria or virus in the food. It is not just about presence of toxins in the food. Certain factors also cause foodborne illnesses, such as consumption of raw meat, contamination of the food by the environment such as air, water, soil, etc., unhealthy immune system of the individual. Young children, pregnant women, and elderly people are at higher risk of developing foodborne diseases. So it is not just about the causative microorganisms, but consumption of raw meat. When the meat is not cooked properly, then it may lead to foodborne diseases, or it may serve as one of the factors contributing to foodborne illness. Similarly, like that, young children, women, and elderly people are at higher risk of acquiring foodborne diseases if the person's immune system is also not proper, if the person's immune system is not healthy, then that also can be one of the factor contributing to foodborne illness and contamination of the food by the environment. That is why we focus on keeping the environment hygienic, keeping it clean so that the food is not contaminated by the air, the environment outside. Moving on, let us see what are the signs and symptoms of foodborne illnesses. The first thing that we have to understand about the signs and symptoms of foodborne illness is that the signs and symptoms vary in intensity. It can be mild and it can be very serious as well. In the introduction only, we've seen that there can be certain symptoms, it may cause certain disease, certain illness in the person. It may also be associated with the death of the person. That means the symptoms, the intensity of the symptoms varies from one individual to another. Usually, the foodborne diseases resembles intestinal flu, and it is found to last for few hours to few weeks as well. As the food is associated with the digestive tract, it is obvious that the symptoms may resemble with intestinal flu. So the symptoms of foodborne illness is similar, or it resembles intestinal flu, and it may last for few hours up to few weeks. It may last from few hours to few days. As the food is associated with the intestinal tract, as the food is associated with the digestive tract, it is obvious that the symptoms may resemble intestinal flu. But the signs and symptoms may last for a short period of time, for few hours, or it may also extend up to days. The symptoms may include vomiting, tenesmus, dehydration, abdominal tenderness, headache, decreased urine output, and stool may be frequent and may contain mucus, and the stool is frequent and may contain blood and mucus in it. So these are few symptoms that are seen in case of foodborne illnesses, and it is obvious that all of the symptoms also resembles intestinal flu. So these are some of the symptoms of foodborne illnesses. These illnesses produce the symptoms similar to intestinal flu, as we've seen vomiting and tenesmus, which is the feeling to pass stools even though the bowels are already empty. The symptoms of foodborne diseases may include vomiting, tenesmus, which is the feeling to pass stool even though the bowel is empty, abdominal tenderness, dehydration, headache, decreased urine output, and stool is frequent with the presence of mucus or blood in it. So these are few of the symptoms of foodborne illnesses which resembles intestinal flu. Moving on, let us see the diagnosis and investigation that is to be done for foodborne illnesses. Let us now move on and see the diagnostic procedures to be performed for foodborne illnesses. The first one that we have is history collection. So obviously history has to be collected in order to understand the signs and symptoms, to ask for signs and symptoms, and also to see what kind of food product the patient has consumed. The second investigation that can be done is testing of the food that the patient has consumed for the presence of bacteria, virus, or parasite in the food. Blood test can also be performed in order to find the presence of microorganisms in the body of the person, as well as stool examination can be done for food handlers as well. The next investigation that can be done is investigation of the environment in which the food was prepared as well as consumed. So here we can do the investigation of the kitchen to see if hygienic measures were followed while cooking. Inspection of kitchen and eating area is one of the important investigation in case of foodborne illnesses. And finally, method and techniques of food preparation also has to be examined properly. So these are the various investigations that can be done in order to diagnose foodborne diseases. Not just the person, not just the blood sample or the stool sample of the person is to be collected and examined, but also the inspection of the kitchen, the inspection of the eating area, as well as the food handlers are to be examined thoroughly. Under foodborne illness, the major problem that we see is food poisoning. So food poisoning is one of the major problems that is faced by people. Under foodborne illness, we have food poisoning, which is one of the most common problem, and it is caused by consumption of contaminated food. So the food can be contaminated with various chemicals, various toxins, or pathogenic microorganisms which may cause or produce illness in the individual. So food poisoning is divided into two different segments. As I told in the introduction, food poisoning can be caused due to toxins, caused due to chemicals, or due to presence of microorganisms in the food. So according to that, food poisoning is divided into two different segments, which includes the bacterial food poisoning and non-bacterial food poisoning. So food poisoning is basically of two types. The first one is bacterial food poisoning and the second one is non-bacterial food poisoning. So non-bacterial food poisoning is when the food is contaminated with various chemicals such as non-bacterial food poisoning is a kind of food poisoning that is caused due to the presence of any kind of chemicals in the food that is consumed by the person, which may include fertilizer, pesticides, etc. The second type is bacterial food poisoning. Bacterial food poisoning is caused due to the presence of bacteria due to the contamination of the food by the bacteria or the toxins that are released by the bacteria, which multiplies within the host, which multiplies within the individual and causes food poisoning. Bacterial food poisoning includes salmonella food poisoning, staphylococci food poisoning, and botulism. So now let us try to understand that the mechanism of food poisoning is very simple. The food is contaminated either with the chemicals, with the toxins, or with pathogenic microorganisms. When a healthy individual consumes the food that has been contaminated, the microorganisms enters inside the human body, multiplies in the human body, and bring changes in the normal physiological functioning of the person as well as in the tissues of the person. This leads to occurrence of the disease in an individual. So mechanism of food poisoning includes ingestion of the contaminated food. As the person is ingesting the contaminated food, the pathogenic microorganism is also entering the body of the person. Once it enters the body of the person, it starts multiplying in the person's body and causes various distortion in the person's body, leading to food poisoning. Now let us move on and see the treatment of foodborne illnesses. The first thing to look after in foodborne illnesses, as we've seen, there is continuous vomiting and dehydration in signs and symptoms. We have to increase the fluid intake of the person. If the person is in the condition to drink, or else IV fluid has to be provided to the patient. The second thing to do in case of food poisoning or foodborne illness is to hospitalize the patient if the symptoms are very severe. If the patient is having severe pain, vomiting, and the signs of dehydration are very evident, then the patient has to be hospitalized. If the kidney of the person is unable to perform the normal functioning, dialysis has to be done until and unless the kidney goes to normal functioning. Next, we have complication of foodborne illnesses. Now, foodborne illnesses may be associated with various complications. It may have various complications such as spontaneous abortion in pregnant women. Foodborne diseases can be so severe that it may also induce abortion in pregnant women. Acute renal failure, seizures, heart failure, and inflammation of pancreas are some of the common complications that are associated with foodborne illnesses. And lastly, we have prevention of foodborne illnesses. We've seen that foodborne illnesses are caused because of ingestion of contaminated food, because of not maintaining the hygiene in the cooking area in the kitchen as well as eating place, right? So foodborne illnesses can be prevented just by maintaining proper hygiene as well as maintaining proper cleanliness during the time of cooking as well as eating the food. Prevention includes proper cooking of the food in order to prevent foodborne illnesses. When the food is cooked properly or processed properly, then the presence of microorganisms in the food is decreased, thereby preventing foodborne illnesses. Do not keep the cooked food in room temperature for more than 2 hours. The next thing to do is to cook the food at appropriate temperatures. So we've been saying from the time we started food hygiene that every food required different kind of temperature to be stored, to be cooked as well. So the temperature that is required by the particular food must be maintained while cooking as well. Keep the raw meat or poultry away from readily cooked food. So if the food is already prepared, then the raw meat or raw poultry must not be kept near the readily cooked food. Washing of hands for at least 20 seconds with soap and warm water must be done before handling the meat as well as after handling raw meat. While the meat is stored in the refrigerator, the poultry and other forms of meat must be kept in a separate container if it is stored inside the refrigerator. Keep the utensils and kitchen surfaces clean. So hygiene is one of the major important things that is to be looked after. Therefore, the kitchen has to be kept clean. The surface of the kitchen has to be clean as well as the vessels, the utensils that are used for cooking the food also must be properly cleansed. The next thing to do is to maintain the temperature of the food. Hot food is to be kept hot and cold food is to be kept cold. So the temperature of the food that is required by the food in order to make sure that food stays healthy and is fit for human consumption, maintain the proper temperature of the food as required by the food. And finally, reduce the food handling time, which means we have to touch avoiding the food frequently. The handling of the food, the time that is required to handle the food must be avoided as much as possible so that people do not contaminate the food. And finally, if people are suffering from any kind of infection, boils, abscess, etc., those kind of people who are already infected, who can serve as a potential source of infection. So that is it for today's session. In this session today, we have discussed about foodborne illness, in which we've seen what is foodborne illness, what is food poisoning, what is the mechanism of foodborne illness, what are the signs and symptoms, how it can be diagnosed, how it can be treated, and what are the various complications, and how can we prevent foodborne illnesses. I hope the class was helpful, and I'll see you all in the next session. Thank you and have a great day ahead.